Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Tonight, we step into a confession. Not a crime of violence, not a scandal, not a betrayal written in headlines. Something quieter, something that happens every day, but leaves scars just the same. The first story is called, I Ghosted Him. No explanation, no final message, no warning, just silence, a slow fade into nothing. On the surface, it sounds simple, but behind that silence was fear, avoidance, and a truth I didn't want to face. This isn't about drama. It's about the moment someone chooses disappearance instead of honesty, and what that choice really costs. Let's begin. The light in the hallway has been flickering for 3 days. And every time it pulses, I think it's him. I know it's not. His car isn't in the driveway. His key is still sitting in that ceramic bowl by the door, right where he left it 2 weeks ago. But the silence in this apartment is so loud, feels like a weight on my chest. I'm sitting here, staring at a screen that's been dark for 10 days, wondering if I'm a monster, or just a coward. Maybe there isn't a difference. I was standing in the middle of a grocery store, staring at a box of the specific herbal tea he likes, the one that smells like lemon and cardboard. My phone vibrated. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was the 14th check-in text. I knew it would say something like, I'm not even mad. I just need to know you're alive. The heat crawled up my neck. People pushed their carts past me, living normal, functional lives, while I stood there, paralyzed by a notification. I didn't put the tea in the cart. I didn't reply. I turned my phone off and walked out of the store, leaving a full basket of groceries in the middle of aisle 4. The guilt is a living thing now. He eats breakfast with me. It sits in the passenger seat when I drive to work. He didn't do anything wrong. Not in the way people usually mean it. He didn't hit me. He didn't cheat. He was just there, always there, leaning on me, pouring his anxieties into me, like I was something that couldn't overflow. And then one Tuesday, I decided I was full. I told him I was going to the pharmacy. That was the last thing I ever said to him. But sitting in my car, in that grocery store parking lot, gasping for air that felt too thin to breathe, I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. I hadn't just blocked his number. I hadn't just ignored his family. I had done something worse, much worse. I made sure he could never find me. And the way I did it involved his own medical history. If he ever figures out what I used, and how I used it against him, I won't just be the girl who ghosted. I'll be a criminal. 3 months ago, things were perfect. That's the word our friends used. We were the couple with a shared Pinterest board, titled Future Home Vibes. He was sweet, soft-spoken, utterly devoted. But devotion can feel a lot like being haunted. Do you think I'm boring? He asked one night. We were lying in bed. The blue light from the TV washed over us. No, I said. I was focused on my book. Why would you say that? You haven't looked at me in 20 minutes, he whispered. Closed my eyes. Counted to 5. It was constant. The need for reassurance. Like a leak in a boat. No matter how much water I bailed out, the floor was always wet. I started staying late at the office. Not because I had work, but because the fluorescent lights and the hum of the copier felt more peaceful than the emotional demands waiting at home. One night, I came home and found him sitting in the dark. He had cooked dinner. It was cold on the table. I thought you'd be home at 6, he said. There was no anger in his voice, just that quiet hurt, the kind that makes you feel like a villain for simply existing. I got caught up, I lied. I just miss you, he said, reaching for my hand. I feel like you're slipping away. He was right. I was. But instead of saying, I need space, or this isn't working, I squeezed his hand back. I hated myself for it. I hated that I was performing love, 'cause I was afraid of what honesty would destroy. I started to realize he didn't love me. He loved the version of me that kept him stable. I was a human weighted blanket. And I began to wonder, what would happen if the blanket vanished? Would he fall apart? Or would he finally learn to stand? I told myself I was doing it for him. That was the first lie. The great disappearing act didn't happen overnight. It was smaller than that, colder than that, a series of calculated withdrawals. I stopped mentioning my plans, stopped asking about his day. I moved my things, piece by piece, to a storage unit across town, rented under my maiden name. "Where's that blue vase?" he asked one morning. "Oh, I think I broke it," I said. Didn't look up from my coffee. "I threw it out." He looked confused. "I didn't hear it break. I did it while you were at the gym." "Sorry." Every lie landed softly, and every time, I felt something dark bloom inside me. For 2 years, he dictated the emotional temperature of our house. If he was sad, we were sad. If he was anxious, became the anchor. I was taking control. I was writing the ending. And he didn't even know. We were in the final chapter. The breaking point came when he surprised me at work with flowers. Bright yellow daisies. Most women would be thrilled. I felt hunted. He stood in the lobby, smiling. "Surprise! What are you doing here?" My voice was sharper than I meant it to be. His smile faltered. "I just wanted to see you. Is that okay?" Coworkers were watching, so I played the part. I hugged him, but my body was aboard. That's when I knew. I didn't just want to break up. I wanted to erase him. I wanted a world where he had no access to my time, my space, or my face. That night, while he was asleep, took his phone. I knew the passcode. It was my birthday. I didn't open his messages. I didn't check his photos. I went into his settings, and I did something can never take back. I waited until he left for his weekend hiking trip with his brothers. He had been looking forward to it for a month. He kissed me goodbye at the door, promising to bring back pictures of the summit. "I love you," he said. "Have a safe trip," I replied. I couldn't bring myself to say it back. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, I went into overdrive. A U-Haul was already parked around the block. I didn't take everything, just my life, my clothes, my books, the computer, the cat. I left the furniture. I left the lemon tea. I tried to write a note. But as I stared at the blank page, I realized any words would give him a hook. If I said I'm sorry, he would want to forgive me. If I said I hate you, he would want to fix it. If I said nothing, he would have nothing to hold on to. So I tore the paper up. By the time he reached the trailhead, I had changed my number, deactivated my social media, signed the lease on the new apartment. Should have been clean. It wasn't. He has a history of severe panic attacks, the kind that look like heart attacks. He keeps a digital health monitor synced to his phone. Emergency alerts. Automatic 911 triggers. I was his primary contact. That last night, while he was sleeping, I opened his phone. I didn't read his messages. I didn't scroll through his photos. I went straight into the health app, and I changed the emergency alert settings. I redirected critical event notifications to a dead email address I created. If his heart started racing on that mountain, if he collapsed, his phone would not call 911 automatically. It would send a silent alert into a void. I told myself it was so he couldn't manipulate me, that he might fake a medical emergency, that he would use it to pull me back. I told myself I was protecting my peace. 2 weeks passed. The first few days were bliss. Could breathe. I could eat what I wanted. I didn't have to manage anyone's emotional weather. Felt free, like I had escaped a cage. Then the check-in messages started. Not to my new phone, to my work email, then calls to my office. He was frantic. He wasn't even asking me to come back anymore. He was begging to know if I was okay. And then, yesterday, everything stopped. No messages, No calls. Nothing. For someone like him, silence is not normal. He is a fighter. He tries until his fingers bleed. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was terrifying. This morning, I opened the dead email address. I hadn't checked it since I left. My hands were shaking as I typed the password. There were 4 notifications. Critical heart rate detected. 145 beats per minute. Critical heart rate detected. 160 beats per minute. Fall detected. Location, High Peaks Trailhead. Hector 4. The timestamps were from 3 days ago. I'm sitting here in my perfect, quiet apartment. The hallway light flickers again. I want to call his brothers. I want to call the park rangers. But if I do, I have to admit what I did. I didn't just leave him. I disabled his lifeline. I look at the ceramic bowl by the door. I didn't just take my things. I took his spare key too. Why did I take his key? Then I hear it. Rhythmic. Scratching. My new front door. No one is supposed to have this address. It's not a knock. It's the sound of someone who doesn't have the strength to lift their hand, but won't walk away. The scratching stops. The silence that follows is worse. Feels heavy, pressurized, like someone holding their breath on the other side of the door. My heart slams against my ribs. I press my forehead to the wood. If I don't open it, he isn't there. If I don't look, the alerts aren't real. Then his voice. Exhausted. I know you're in there. I saw the light go out when I pulled up. Close my eyes. Go away, I whisper. I can't. There is a dull thud, like he slid down the frame. I checked the settings on my phone after I got back from the hospital. I thought it was a glitch. The hospital. My stomach drops. The doctors said it was a miracle someone found me when they did. My heart didn't like the climb. But what it really didn't like was realizing the person I trusted most wanted me to disappear. I just wanted to be left alone. Shout. You were suffocating me. I couldn't breathe. So you decided to let me die. Question hangs there. I don't have an answer. I didn't want him dead. I just wanted him gone. But when you hold someone's lifeline, there isn't much difference. I'm leaving the key on the mat, he says quietly. And the phone. I wiped it. I don't want anything that connects us anymore. Metal hits tile. Slow footsteps. An elevator chime. Silence. Open the door. The hallway is empty. The flickering light has finally burned out. On the welcome mat, my spare key. His cracked phone. Pinned to the door frame. A small torn piece of paper. A printout of the emergency contact screen. My name crossed out with a thick black line. Underneath, written in shaky handwriting. I hope the silence is everything you wanted. Go back inside. Lock the door. Slide down to the floor. The apartment is quiet. Perfect. Me. No text. No calls. No breathing in the other room. I got exactly what I asked for. So why does it feel like I'm the one buried alive? The next confession is quieter. It doesn't start with a dramatic exit or a slammed door. Starts with certainty. The kind of certainty that feels righteous. For years, I told the same story. They hurt me. They ruined my life. They were the reason everything fell apart. I repeated it to friends, to strangers, to myself. And every time I said it, felt true. Because anger is easy to carry. Gives you direction. Gives you someone to point at. But here's the problem with pointing fingers. Eventually, you have to look at your own hands. This story is called, I spent years blaming them. I was wrong. And sometimes, the hardest confession isn't what someone did to you. It's what you did to yourself. The scent of stale hospital coffee always makes me want to vomit. But for 3 years, it was the only thing strong enough to keep me awake. And angry, I would sit in those plastic orange chairs, stare at the sterile white tiles, and rehearse the speech I would give. If he ever woke up, it was perfect, dark, cruel, polished by repetition. I would tell him how he destroyed my life. How one night of needing to clear his head turned me into a permanent ghost in my own home. I blamed him for every bill, every sleepless night, every piece of my youth, rotting away under fluorescent ICU lights. Hatred became routine, like brushing my teeth, like breathing. 3 years later, I was standing inside a dusty storage unit, holding a damp cardboard box that smelled like my childhood. That's when I found the envelope. My hands were shaking so hard. The paper rattled. It was a bank statement, not from our joint account, private one, opened in his name. 6 months before the accident. The heat flared instantly. Of course, he was hiding money, planning to leave me, preparing an escape. The narrative slid into place so easily. I tore through the boxes, fueled by a fury that had become my entire personality. I needed proof. I needed justification. I needed something that confirmed I wasn't the villain for spending 3 years wishing he would just let go, so I could finally live without the constant hum of his medical equipment in the background. Then I saw the transfers. The recipient. It wasn't a woman. It wasn't a secret apartment. It was my father's gambling debt. I sank onto the concrete floor. The air turned heavy, like I was breathing underwater. My phone buzzed. A text from the nurse. His vitals were dipping again. But I couldn't move. I was staring at a paper trail. Month after month. Transfer after transfer. He had been draining himself, bankrupting his own future, to keep my family's shame quiet, while I sat at his bedside, telling his unconscious body that he ruined my life. I checked the date of the last transfer, 2 hours before the crash. He hadn't been clearing his head. He had been driving to a collection agency, and somewhere between the burden of my father's secret and the weight of trying to protect me from it, he lost control of the car. For 3 years, I told myself he was selfish, reckless, irresponsible. For 3 years, I blamed him. But sitting there on that cold concrete floor, holding proof that he had been saving my family, while I was condemning him, I realized something unbearable. I wasn't the martyr. I wasn't the victim. I was wrong. 4 years ago, we were the couple everyone envied. He remembered every anniversary, every favorite flower, every small detail most people forget. He worked 2 jobs, and still came home to cook dinner. But I was restless. His goodness felt suffocating, predictable. I told myself I wanted passion, adventure. Instead I had stability. And somehow, I made that the problem. Then the financial glitches began. Small at first. A declined credit card at dinner. A late notice for the electricity bill. "I've got it handled," he'd say. His eyes tired. His smile steady. "Payroll error at the firm. Don't worry." I chose to believe him, because believing him meant I didn't have to look deeper. But the stress grew. It filled the house. Sat between us at dinner. Slept in our bed. He became distant, always on his phone, stepping into the other room for work calls. And I built a story. A neat, convenient story. He was cheating. Fit perfectly. The late nights. The secrecy. The exhaustion. I made myself the victim. It was easier than asking better questions. I started picking fights. About the bills. About the silence. About the way he seemed somewhere else even when he was sitting next to me. "You're never here," I shouted one Tuesday night. "And when you are, you're a ghost. Just tell me who she is so I can move on." He looked at me, and I will never forget that look. It wasn't anger. It wasn't guilt. It was exhaustion. And a sadness so deep. It looked like glass. "There is no one else," he said quietly. "I'm doing this for us." "Liar," I spat. The word hit harder than I intended. He stood there for a moment, like he wanted to say something else. Like he was deciding whether I deserved the truth. Then he picked up his keys and walked out the door. 2 hours later, my phone rang. County hospital. And in that moment, the story I had built about him started to crack. The doctors told me the brain trauma was extensive. He's in there, they said. But we don't know where. That sentence became a prison. He's in there, but unreachable. Alive, but absent. I moved into a state of frozen resentment. For the first year, I played the devoted wife, posted updates online. I thanked people for their prayers. I accepted casseroles with polite smiles. I wore the mask perfectly, but inside, I was screaming. I would stand beside his hospital bed, look at his peaceful, sleeping face, and see a man who had escaped the mess, escaped the bills, escaped the questions, left me behind to clean everything up. I had to sell the house, pack up 4 years of memories into cardboard boxes. I moved into a studio apartment, smelled like lemon bleach, and loneliness. I took a job I hated, just to keep his insurance active. Every morning felt like punishment. Every evening felt like obligation. And every day, I went to see him. I would sit beside the bed, lean close to his ear, and whisper the things I was too good to say in public. "You coward," I whispered one afternoon. "You left me with nothing. You ruined everything because you couldn't just be honest. I hope you can hear me. I hope you know I hate you for this." The heart monitor would blip. Steady. Indifferent. I would stare at it. Sometimes, I wanted it to stop. I wanted the permission to be done. I started dating. Nothing serious. Just drinks. Conversations. Men who didn't know I had a husband. Lying in a hospital bed. I'd come home after those nights, look at his wedding ring sitting on my nightstand, and feel something twisted inside me. A quiet triumph. Moving on. You're the one who's stuck. I blamed him for everything. For my father's sudden retirement. For my parents moving to Florida without warning. For my mother's stroke. For the cracks in our family. For the cracks in me. I blamed him for the woman in the mirror. The one with tired eyes. The one I didn't recognize. It was easier to point at him. Easier to build a villain than to admit. I never asked what he was carrying. I never asked what he was sacrificing. I never asked why the man who remembered every anniversary was suddenly drowning in silence. For years, I blamed him. And every day I did, it kept me from seeing the truth. Back in the storage unit, the floor was covered in the wreckage of my assumptions. Bank statements, torn envelopes, dust floating in a single beam of light like it was performing for an audience of one. Me. I found the letters from my father. They weren't thank you notes. They were demands. Short, dark, transactional. My father, the man I idolized, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, the man who cried at my wedding, had been blackmailing my husband. One note read, "If you tell her about the debt, I'll tell her what you did in college. Keep the payments coming, and she never has to know her perfect dad is a fraud." The words didn't feel real. They felt staged, like a cruel prop planted in someone else's life. But the handwriting was his. The threats were his. The cruelty was his. I felt like I was watching a movie of my own life. Only all the colors were wrong. Too harsh. Too sharp. My husband hadn't been cheating. He hadn't been bored. He hadn't been pulling away. He had been protecting something fragile. My image of my father. And he had been paying for it. With overtime. With exhaustion. With silence. With his own dignity. He worked those extra jobs. Not for vacations. Not for savings. But to pay off a debt that wasn't even his. While I screamed at him for being irresponsible. While I accused him of betrayal. While I called him a liar. The last letter was different. The envelope was creased. Handled too many times. It was from my husband. To my father. Dated the day of the crash. My hands were shaking as I read it. I can't do this anymore. I'm telling her tonight. I don't care what you say to her. I'd rather she hate me for the truth than hate me for the lies I'm telling to protect you. I'm coming over to get the original documents back. This ends today. The storage unit felt smaller. The air thinner. He wasn't clearing his head. He wasn't running away. He was on his way to confront my father, to end it, to tell me the truth, to risk losing me, so I could finally see clearly. He was stressed, exhausted, probably shaking the way I was shaking now. Maybe crying, maybe rehearsing how he would explain it. And somewhere on that road, he missed the stop sign. I stood up too fast. My legs buckled. I caught myself on a stack of boxes labeled Christmas. The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. For 3 years, I told a dying man that I hated him for leaving me. For 3 years, I leaned into his ear and called him a coward. For 3 years, I resented him for escaping a mess he had been trying to clean up alone. He was the only person who had actually stayed loyal, stayed silent, stayed protective. And I defended the wrong man. I defended the man who was destroying us. My hero, my father, the architect of it all. And now, the only person who deserved an apology was lying in a hospital bed, unconscious, and I had no idea if he could still hear me. I drove to the hospital like a woman possessed. I didn't see red lights. I didn't feel the rain. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the storm, and I welcomed the chaos. It matched the noise inside my chest. I burst into his room, breathless. The machine was still beeping. That steady, rhythmic metronome. The soundtrack to my bitterness. The pulse I had memorized better than my own. I grabbed his hand. It was cold. It felt like parchment that had been folded too many times. "I'm sorry," I sobbed, collapsing to my knees beside the bed. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." The words came apart in my mouth. I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. I looked at his face. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't see a burden. I didn't see a coward. I didn't see a man who had abandoned me. I saw the man who had loved me enough to let me believe he was the villain, so I would never have to discover. I was raised by one. I stayed there all night. I told him everything. About the storage unit. About the letters. About the bank transfers. About the police. My father's name felt foreign when I said it out loud. I told him I had finally chosen the truth. I told him I was finally here. Not angry. Not rehearsing a speech. Just here. And as the sun began to bleed through the hospital blinds, happened, which, almost nothing, but not nothing, froze. The monitor responded first. His heart rate climbed, a jagged rhythm replacing the steady hum. "Nurse!" I screamed, slamming the call button. A step, voices, hands guiding me back. They checked his pupils, adjusted lines, called for a doctor. The room filled with motion, urgent, controlled, terrifying. One of the doctors looked at me, grim, surprised. "He's showing signs of awareness," he said carefully. "It could be a spike before a crash. Or it could be something else. Something else. Hope is a fragile animal. Startles easily." I stood by the window as they worked. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger who had been awake for years. My phone buzzed in my hand. My father. Likely calling from a holding cell. The screen lit up with his name. I let it ring, then fade. For years I wanted my husband to wake up, so I could finish him with my words. Deliver the final blow. Close the chapter. I wanted him to wake up more than I wanted air. But for the first time, I was afraid. Because if he wakes up, he'll remember. The whispers. The venom. The "I hate you." The "I wish you'd just let go." The cruel confessions I poured into his silence. When I believed it was safe, the doctor stepped out into the hallway, closed the door behind him. "He's stable," he said. My knees almost gave out. "But he's awake." The world narrowed to a single point. "He's asking for someone." I stepped forward immediately. My voice caught in my throat. But the doctor lifted a hand. Not unkind, just firm. "He didn't ask for you," he said quietly. "Was heavy." He asked for a lawyer. The hallway feels longer than it did an hour ago. Sterile, bright, unforgiving. I'm staring at the closed door, at the barrier between us, between what we were, between what I destroyed. I spent years blaming him, and I was wrong, completely, devastatingly wrong. But the truth might be the thing that saves him, and the thing that costs me everything, because love can survive lies, sometimes even betrayal. But I don't know if it survives 3 years of whispered hatred into a silence that was never truly silent. And that's where I'm standing, in a hospital hallway that smells like disinfectant and second chances. The door is closed. He's awake, and I don't know if I'm about to get my husband back or lose him for good. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Some stories aren't about villains and heroes. Sometimes they're about perspective, about pride, about the terrible things we convince ourselves are true because the truth feels harder to face. If this story moved you, unsettled you, or made you think about someone you may have misjudged, take that feeling seriously. Life doesn't always give us 3 years to figure it out. Let me know in the comments. If you were in her place, what would you do next? And if you were him, could you forgive her? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real stories that hit where it hurts. I'll see you in the next one.